Colonel Matthew T. Good is a native of Texas. He grew up in the country and enjoyed riding dirt bikes, playing football, and being in the great outdoors. He went to Texas A&M University, where he joined the Corps of Cadets and excelled in scholastics and leadership training. Upon graduation from Texas A&M, Matt was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps, where he has been an active duty officer for the last 26 years. As a Marine, Matt has garnered many accolades and has led troops in combat during several deployments. He is highly respected and is currently serving as a Marine liaison to the U.S. Senate. Matt is not defined by his Marine Corps activities. He is an avid long-distance runner and enjoys hiking the countryside with his wife and 4 kids. He is a world traveler, amateur archaeologist, writer, and a true Renaissance man. Today, we welcome to the conversation Colonel Matthew T. Good. Hello, everyone. I'm here today with Matt Good, and Matt is going to talk to us a little bit about his experience with leadership and how he's developed different practices throughout his career with establishing boundaries and working through failures and really managing different challenges. So first of all, welcome to the show, Matt. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you so much for the invitation. So happy to be here.
Well, if you could, first of all, just give us a little bit of a background on, where you're from and who you are and what brought you to where you are now, like in terms of your career and, what you've been doing for the last however many years.
Cassandra. So, grew up in Texas on a little bitty Old Hereford ranch in Northeast Texas, and knew I liked being outside and knew I liked people and having my feet on the ground. And so I decided to join the service and went to Texas A&M like my grandfather and married my high school sweetheart. And we've been married 26 years. We have 4 kids. Our oldest is in the Coast Guard. And I have I've served in various roles and capacity for the last 26 plus years in the Marine Corps.
Okay, so that's quite a lot to talk about then in terms of not only just you married your high school sweetheart, so obviously you've had a lot of ups and downs in your relationships and growth as people, but then in addition to that with 4 children, and you bring in this whole other experience as your career, that's a lot to manage and negotiate right there. So I'm really curious to talk to you just about what your overall experience looks like with being a leader at work and how you manage some of the challenges that you've faced. And then in addition to that, how you then show up at home as Matt, the dad, Matt, the husband, and how you kind of let some of that stress go. So talk to me a little bit about, share a couple stories if you'd like, or just tell us kind of what you do at your job that you think is important for us to know.
So I'll start with the first question about being a father and a husband. So I think I've said this for years, and I think it's still true. I think it was always true that if I do know anything at all about leadership, it's from my failures as a husband and a father. And great Marine Corps leaders who are not also husbands and fathers. I sometimes I have a hard time connecting with them because I think, yes, you're a great leader, but were you also a mother and a wife or a husband and a father? And so I have learned a lot about myself in that way, and I don't always do a good job of coming home as not the great Santini. So I I try pretty hard. I tell you what really helps is a good, long, solid commute to just sever, your former life and help you connect to what you're going to be until you fall asleep. That really helps kind of bridge that gap for me. I don't like to drive and I don't like a lot of commute, but just even a little bit it will do the trick.
Just to kind of help some of that separation, like you say, and to make you feel like then you're stepping into that different role, which has its own unique challenges and stressors, but also, wonderful happiness associated with that. So I think I love how you said, just reminding yourself to step into that space and leave the other one behind. But then also I like how you are incorporating those things that you've learned, and, nothing teaches you how to adapt and change to a situation like parenthood, I guess, right? When you have all sorts of unique same thing, you're raising unique personalities and trying to help them become who they are. And then I think, interestingly, in your job from a leadership perspective, you're really doing those same kinds of things at work, as you're shaping people and helping to build them to a vision and helping to bring them along toward a goal. So do you find that you are then using some of those same tactics at home, at work, across the board? Is that just who you are?
I would be hard pressed to tell you that there's some technique other than just vulnerability, love, trust, mutual respect. Other than those things, there's not a whole lot that my family will let me get away with as Colonel Good in the house.
Well, that's good that they've kind of learned their boundaries and separation of that too, I guess, right? So talk to me a little bit about what that looks like for you at work. I mean, obviously you've had a lot of pressure throughout your career. You've had a lot of different situations that have been high stress. So how do you manage some of those things, or how do you approach, a situation where you do have to lead and maybe you're not entirely sure how to do it or what the variables might be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have had just outstanding success by being a little vulnerable and just being really honest about what I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and then encouraging team collaboration. I've just never been let down by a group of professionals who especially it has to be that ego is not in the equation. And so as a leader, if you can set that tone, set that example, and construct that environment where ego is not a factor, and folks on your team can are comfortable not only failing but like weaving in and out of each other's areas of expertise, and back into their own. I think I've never been let down, never been disappointed, and able to accomplish things as a team that I think other teams, maybe even more talented teams, but less functional teams with less mutual understanding, love, trust, mutual respect. I think they that those teams outperform even folks with better test scores.
I love that. I love that you started it too, just the vulnerability and also admitting what you don't know. I mean, that's part of it, right? Is really just being able to be open and be honest. And that's part of putting the ego aside, right? Yes, you might be a highly credentialed person in an area, but you still might not know something, right? So being able to state that and pull in the people who might know, or to build that team from that place. And then you as a leader really starting from there, encouraging and allowing the people below you to embody that same perspective. That's building that kind of within your team. So I can see where, you would have that kind of unique mutual trust and that understanding that other teams might not, just from really, there's that base level of, hey, I know that this person is going to be straight with me, versus, posturing a little bit too.
And in time competitive environments where the team that turns the fastest, that makes decisions the quickest, reacts the most responsibly to any given stimuli, the teams that can do that are they're and they can do that only because there's room for mistakes, there's permission to make original mistakes, and they love learning and growth more than they love their own egos and reputations. And that's been being a part of teams like that has been the highlight of my professional career.
Yeah. I mean, just the way you're saying everything, they love the growth more than their ego. And that's something that, if you can find that and foster that, then your potentials really are unlimited, because you're constantly seeking new experiences, or seeking growth, or seeking to understand. So, okay, that's wonderful. What are some ways that you think that comes out in terms of just, is this an explicit conversation that you have with your teams, or is this something where just through your embodiment of this that they kind of pick up on it?
So, uh, you might expect that there's just like this big sort of aha moment where, but I find that trust is iterative, and it builds over time, and often it's a lot of little things.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a sergeant major once used to say all the time that folks don't know, and I'm sure he didn't come up with this, but I love it, and I attributed it to him. He said, folks don't care what you know until they know how much you care, and so just a thousand little iterative acts of caring, genuine, sincere, and I think that those types of things really matter, and it you can't, particularly with a large culture where you're leading indirectly, you can't turn that ship overnight. It takes a good bit of time to avoid those icebergs, but on smaller teams you can change a culture more quickly, but it's still not, there's not like one speech you could give or one demonstrative act. It takes a deliberate, intentional approach over time, and there's plenty of opportunity for failure, and everybody's looking for the say do gap, right? You said this, but you did this, and folks are looking for you to be a hypocrite on it, and I just think every time they realize that you're not a hypocrite today, you build trust, you put money in the bank.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're showing again by example, and then it's those day-to-day moments that is similar to like children, not to, again, bring that back to your personal life, but it really is. It's the same thing with kids. You're showing that consistency and that stability. You show up for them so they know you're going to be there. It's like so many of the principles that you're talking about. I'm loving it because I teach about feelings and relationships. And so often, people will be like, ooh, and think it's all soft and like it's just about crying all the time. But everything that you've said, those are the things that I teach in my relationship classes. It's how you show up for people. It's that mutual trust. It's that respect. It's that understanding. And it's the ability to admit like when you're not right or when you've messed up, and how are we going to move forward, and how are we going to look at that in the face and then be better going forward, as opposed to focusing on where we were in the past. So it's interesting to me because I think if we start with some of those relational principles, within, they really can translate to the business world. Yet somehow we still look at businesses and organizations as like their own entity where these concepts don't have a place. Like the fact that you said vulnerability, of course makes me super happy. But there are some people from an organizational standpoint who think that that's, there's no place for that. What would you say about that?
Well, there wouldn't be an advocate of vulnerability for its own sake, or just some leader saying too much about their personal life. And but I think when it is for the sake of building an essential relationship, or for the sake of generating trust that's absolutely going to be needed when the organization is employed in the way in which it was constructed and designed, right? But when it was intended, the way it was intended. I think those are I don't like when people pretend. It's and I know, and I think I can tell that the Marines and people, I don't think people like it when you're pretending, and so just admitting what you don't know, and also too, you never forget when you teach a leader something. When a leader really doesn't understand, and he or she asks a junior, and he asks, truly desiring to seek to understand, and the junior individual teaches the leader I promise you that that junior never forgets it. I could remember any time a senior leader ever asked me a question. Just a quick story. A general I really admire called me up one day a couple years ago, and he knew I had a little nugget of expertise in a particular area, and he goes, hey, teach me about this. And so I start talking. He's like, no, maybe you could just come on over. And so I go over, and 2 hours later we're done. The next I think to tell him this thing, and then I check myself and I don't do it. And then the next morning I'm back at work and the phone rings. He's like, oh, so I was thinking about the stuff you were telling me, and I have some questions. He went through some very, very thoughtful questions. And we talked through that over the phone this time for about a half hour, and he was all done. And I was like, look, sir, I want to tell you something. And he's like, what's that? And I was like, you're a freak. I said, you are, you're introspective enough and honest enough to know that you don't know, to know that you have some genuine knowledge gaps. You're humble enough to admit it, and you're disciplined enough to follow through and listen and try to fill those gaps. And he said to me something I'll never forget. He said, well, if that makes me a freak, I'm sorry. And he goes, you're probably right. But he said, look, I've just made a career out of trying to do right by people, and I can't do it if I don't know. And I really respected that. And I could be, I respect the fact that I could call a general officer a freak. You don't get to do that very often.
I didn't see that that's where that story was going, if I'm going to be honest with you. It's great. But I love that the way you even described that, and just how you said, like, he then was able to be like thoughtful and introspective and came back to you to ask questions. I mean, that's huge too. First of all, to ask you for help, but then to say, hey, I need more help on this, and I think that right there to me also embodies, like you said, a great leader. I'm not afraid to admit that I don't know something, but I'm going to ask somebody who might, regardless of if their status is the same as mine, or regardless of, if their life experiences are similar to mine. So, okay, given all this, you're talking a lot about the leadership and some of the things that you do. What are some challenges that you think come up with this then, or other things that, stressors, or what makes it difficult?
Well, a larger culture can be bad to that. Your culture of, that vulnerability is weakness. Mm-hmm. Can be a counterattack to a more microculture that you're trying to establish. Sometimes you really do fail, right? The organization really does fail, and so convincing others that this is still a viable leadership model. This is not only viable, but it's still what we're going for. In the wake of a failure is really hard to do. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to get people who otherwise might be a little reluctant or reticent to accept. Mm-hmm. They're looking at a whole lot of W's in that organization, right? That's really easy. They're like, oh, this is why you guys can finish each other's sandwiches, and is because you get each other, and you love, trust, and respect each other. But it is tough if there are some failures in the organization, and they get that organization gets outcycled or mm-hmm. or in my language, defeated, right? It's hard to get people that this is still a winning strategy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that, like, within that, then, if there are those challenges and those failures, do you come back to them and talk about them, or is it something where you're focusing solely on going forward, or is there something where, as a team, are you discussing those, or what does that look like for you?
Well, I think you absolutely have to address your failures as a team, and these would be hard conversations. uh, and I don't think that the only reason to address your failure there is solely for convincing people that a leadership model built on love and respect, and where trust is the coin of the realm. I don't think that that's the sole reason then to go back and address your failure, but it's certainly one of them. But I think organizations that are honest about their failures make original mistakes, and I think that's maybe the best we can hope for.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the things then, given all of these, you're managing people, you're working through a lot of these leadership principles. Do you talk about, and then the boundaries too? So how do you set boundaries, on your time there, and how you're building this trust and being vulnerable and open in a leadership position, but then yet still having this other space where you do have to be Matt, the dad, Matt, the husband, how do you set boundaries for yourself and work and home? I know you said the commute, but a lot of times, you have stressful things that you're dealing with. How do you put those out of your mind, or what do you do to kind of separate yourself from those?
Well, it reminds me of, and you may have to steer me back on in just a second. Your question is a good one, and it reminds me of, so as a captain, company commander in Iraq. My company had 50 Purple Hearts. I gave out 50 Purple Hearts. Purple Heart is an award that you receive for wounds. And
my dad has 2 Purple Hearts. Yeah, from Vietnam. Mm-hmm.
So you certainly know.
Mm-hmm.
And you never want one, right? You never want one of those things. But 50 Purple Hearts of a company at a 250 was it was a lot. And it was a lot for the time in 2004, and so those guys were busy. We were busy, and I was really proud. And I wouldn't have come to this on my own. My first sergeant talked me onto this at the time, and we talked. Mm-hmm. And whenever we got back and we had lost, or we'd experienced some failures, or we'd gotten slapped around a little bit. Even if we gave back more than we took, it was so important to sit back and be honest about that loss. I'm really proud of the fact that of those 250 Marines and sailors, we had 0 cases of confirmed PTSD. Wow. After that. And I totally attributed that to just being able to sit down like a family, and own our mistakes, own the things that happened, even if they couldn't be attributed to our mistakes or our successes, mm-hmm. and just process them together in a safe place where where judgment was withheld, mm-hmm. and we really just had each other's best interest in mind. And that was such a rich and powerful thing. We did it every day.
Wow. So, that's amazing. I hope you're loving hearing a different perspective today with Matt and I. I wanted to take a moment and ask a favor from you. Can you quickly scroll below this episode and give it a review? Or if you're on YouTube, give it a thumbs up and a comment. Giving reviews on a podcast helps others find these episodes, and it's my mission to help everyone live a life of wholeness. This is a team effort, and it would mean the world to me. Thank you so much. Now back to the episode with Matt.
Those are important. And I think, that sort of thing is certainly fungible in family life, to walk into a child's bedroom and apologize for losing your temper as they're going to sleep, and endeavor to do better the next day, and just to own that, and teach them to, own their failures as well without excuses, and certainly acknowledging contributing factors and things that might get you to, start setting you in motion to make those same mistakes again in the future. You asked about boundaries. I don't know if that answered the first part of your question.
No, that's a wonderful, that's a great, thank you for sharing those examples, because I think everything you said about just being open about the failures within that space, that you were able to really talk, and you said process what that was, and not just say, okay, we failed, or that's what happened, but to sit there with everybody and to really move through those experiences. And then yeah, for me as a survivor of childhood PTSD, and seeing my dad, the thing that I did differently from my dad is that when I would have those moments or explode or unload, is I did go back and talk to my kids, and that's a different time and a different place. We didn't always know why dad was mad or what have you, so just even hearing you say that brings me so much joy and hope, because I know that's been such a space in the military that people have struggled with too, of like, how do we talk about these very real things that have happened to us and these experiences, and then translate them to family life. And it is like giving yourself that space to process it and to say, like, here's what this really felt like, here's what this is like for us. And that's something where showing your kids then that too, you're giving them such a gift, because you're helping them understand that if you did lose your cool or whatever, that it wasn't about them, it was about you in that moment, or it was about something else and not something they did. So yeah, so there was so much in everything that you said, I don't even know how to unpack it, but it just like really makes me happy on so many levels to hear that that's a thing that happens, because it, we know that from so much other research and from the things that we see people moving through, that isn't just, for your psychological health, that is for your physical health. You want lower blood pressure and your cortisol levels to be regulated and your nervous system to be healthy, right? And we have to release some of those emotions in a safe space, like you said, in an appropriate way. We can't just all go around crying about everything all the time either, So, yeah, that's wonderful that you had that space. Do you think that that is something that is typical, or do you think that that's more unique to what what you were part of?
Oh, I don't. I believe it. I believe it to be an atypical experience among my peers.
Yeah.
You asked about balance. So very early in my career, I was probably forced to think about balance a lot earlier than a lot of my peers and colleagues. In the first battalion I was in, I was fortunate enough to be in with a Vietnam veteran,
Mm-hmm.
and he was always really good to me. And on the day of his retirement, uh, I was there, and we were doing the pretty standard military retirement sort of thing, where you're standing around drinking Coors Light from a Dixie cup and eating broccoli spears dipped in ranch dressing, and and he started talking to me, and he's my dad's age, maybe older, and he's not trying to teach me anything. He's just stream of consciousness teaching, or just talking. And he said, and this guy was so well respected. You can imagine a Vietnam veteran in the 90s, how he would have been, extremely interested in what he had to say and what he had to teach. And so he's just talking to me. And he says, like, I'm on my third marriage. I've got two sets of estranged kids. I just started a 30-year mortgage on a house. I don't own a house. These are my first house payments. I'll be dead before the house is paid off. I have a GED. I've never saved anything. And he just talks to me. He's not trying to, and I loved this guy, and I still do. But I said, I don't want to be like you. And so like right away, I thought about, what is a balanced life? What does that look like? Because I saw he gave everything that he had to the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps would have just continued to take, unflinchingly. And I realized so many people do that. They just give everything, and then they walk away. And I would imagine the same is true for many careers.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's as an escape to pour yourself into this career, or you really just get sucked up in it, I don't know. But I was always I was always seeking to not do that. As a battalion commander, that's about 1,000 Marines and sailors. I tried really hard to be the last person in the morning. I ordered no meetings before 9 o'clock. So wanted to take your wanted to take your kids to school, you could, or if you needed to, help your spouse get off to work, you could do that. And then I tried to be the first one out the door in the evening if we weren't out in the field or certainly deployed. And just so that no one looked out the window and said, well, the boss is still here. I guess I could do this right now and not be the first one out, and just giving everybody permission to live a balanced life. Later on in life, I heard about these numbers. Maybe folks know about them. It was new to me. And they're the numbers 10, 7, 5, 2 for not a panacea, not like, hey, if you're doing this, you definitely have a balanced life, but it was 10 hours of work. I realize it's still a lot. I think it's still like 10 hours of work, 7 hours of sleep, 5 hours of growth and personal development, relationship, those those things that Vietnam vet had missed, right? Those 5 hours, and then 2 hours of physical activity and recovery. And just that if you're kind of at 10, 7, 5, 2, then odds are you're on a right trajectory for some balance. I remember at least on one occasion in my last job, the gentleman who carried the bulk of my water, I was walking out past him about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He's like, "Hey, where are you off to?" And I said, my 10-7-5-2's off, and I needed to go have a conversation with my son that I missed the evening before, and so I just went. I hope more folks do that, because I think there's so much of what we do today that could probably wait until tomorrow. I know that's not a common refrain among senior military folks.
But the way you said that too, and just even you're exactly right, giving people permission. I mean, not just in the military where, permission is key, but just in organizations, for exactly right, for them to see, okay, you are embodying again what you say is okay for them to do. And there is such a hierarchy and a structure in people's minds and even in organizations, that being told is one thing, but then being able to actually witness it and see that that's happening, so you don't fear that there's going to be repercussions or what have you, and just really making that okay for people, because we've kind of established in our culture that those things aren't okay. We've established this culture of busyness where everybody's in a competition to talk about how busy they are, instead of really looking at like what that has done to us, and instead moving toward this place where, yeah, okay, what needs to be done today? What if this is urgent versus what is important? And, how can we delegate some things to still, get our 10-7-5-2. I like that. I'm going to start using that to really keep it in check a little bit, so that's super helpful. So overall, I really like everything that you're saying. I mean, it's so striking to me, because I don't think anyone would look at you and I and think that there are similarities and commonalities in like what we do, but yet everything you just described so embodies the principles of growth and personal awareness and development that I'm trying to teach my students, or that I talk about, because really that's what all of this is, right? Is it's not just our relationships at home or with our families or at work, but it has to start with who we are. And if we're honest with ourselves about who we are and what our needs are and what that looks like. So given that, this is called being whole. So what are the specific things that you do? You got your 10-7-5-2. Is it, I know you like to run, or I've heard you like to run. Is it running? Is that part of it? Is it like going out with friends? Like, what are some ways that you just really let go?
Well, I mentioned that the ritual that my first sergeant as a company commander talked me onto, and the similarities, between that and what my wife and I have are strong. Where there's like so certainly we've known each other for north of 30 now, and there's very little room for me to hide and pretend, and so and she's just a fantastic listener, withholding judgment. And, this was especially true. And, you talked about your father's Vietnam vet. This is one of the things that I don't think was very common for whatever reason, the spirit of the times, or just, maybe a reluctance to talk on behalf of the veteran. But I just freely sharing, like, oh my gosh, I really punted this one, and I'm not even sure how I'm going to be able to live with this one. And you would have been really ashamed of me at this one. And then just, just listening. I just endeavor to be half as good a listener for her as she is for me. I'm ADHD, so it's hard, and I see things all that. So I want to. So that is certainly a major source of my cup not overflowing. Right, it's a measured way to take out the water in the cup is through that relationship. But yes, I try really hard to do about 8 to 9 hours of physical activity a week, every morning. I try hard to deliberately. I try. One second. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I try. I try really hard to set good boundaries. I'll tell you what makes it really hard is the work phone. Because you can be really good drawing that separation, come home, and then instantly be connected to an email, a crappy email, or some other piece of news that you now are forced to confront, not on your terms. So that does make it difficult. So just I try to be disciplined about this. The job I'm in now, it's hard. It's as hard to do as ever before. That my previous job, I was really good. Sometimes I wouldn't even take my work phone home over the weekend. And then, if folks needed to get in touch with me, my boss, they knew my personal number. They knew how to get me if it actually had to happen. And then I try to help people do it too. As a stream of consciousness thinker, I would use the text as a mental notepad and I would just but the rule was, do not respond. Don't even read. If you have enough self-control, don't even read it. If I need you right away, I'll call you. It's just me thinking and bouncing an idea off of you, and get back to me on Monday. But that's not what I've got going on in my present assignment. But I just think being deliberate and intentional about understanding that we're these feeling beings that also think. And deliberately managing the water in our cup is so important. And when I fail to do that, I'm my least favorite version of myself.
Yeah, I mean, aren't we all, right? I mean, that is what all of this relates to, is just really being intentional and not just going through the motions and looking at the life you want to lead and the person that you want to be, and then not just thinking about that, but what are the actions attached to that, and how can I really embody that? And it's interesting. Yeah, sometimes we get so caught up into the things that we should do, or the places or the things ways that we want to be, but then it's the carrying them out. And you are really working and showing, okay, no, I don't just want to be physically fit. I'm going to work on doing that. I don't want to just be vulnerable. I'm going to show people how to do that. So I think you're just a really great role model for people, of not only that this is the things I think you should do, but here is again how I am trying to live this out in my life. And I think that's what makes you a great leader, is that you really are showing up for people in that way, and you're letting people see you do these things in a way, again, that gives them permission, and also gives them, I think, encouragement. Sometimes people don't know what that looks like, because again, maybe the only role model they've ever talked to has been the Vietnam vet that you're saying. And maybe for them, it was this is how it's supposed to be, instead of this isn't what I want. So I really just appreciate the ways that you are open, and thank you for sharing some of these examples, because I think it's, again, helpful for people to recognize that this isn't just, a lot of times when we talk about emotions or we talk about vulnerability, everybody just thinks it's women. People just think it's about relationships and feelings, and they don't realize some of these principles of authenticity and individuality and intention that are just present in our lives as people, not tied to relationships or organizations or things. So, are there other examples or anything else that you'd like to share before we sign off today?
I appreciate the opportunity. I have 8% battery life, and I don't want to get caught in.
All right. Well, Matt, I'm so grateful that you took this time. I know you are a very busy person, and I'm so grateful for all these little pieces of wisdom that you were able to share with everyone. I mean, so many valuable things here that you talked to us about. And I think that with your expertise in leadership, I'm really just want to thank you from a personal and professional standpoint for talking about these principles, because it is something that can help people personally and professionally. So thank you again for your time today, Matt. I'm so grateful that you were here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. So great to be a part of what you're doing. I feel like we're in step. I want more and more of my people to understand these things, and clearly that's your aim.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to do our best to just make this more of the norm, right? So everyone can start from a better place, because then we can be better for other people too. So awesome. Well, thanks again, Matt. I really appreciate your time. Have a great, all right. Bye-bye. Here are a few takeaways from my conversation with Matt Good. Number 1, be vulnerable about what you don't know and lean into collaboration to grow. Number 2, trust is not immediate. It is earned by showing you care in those little moments that build over time. Number 3, even if an organization has failures, it's really about coming together and believing that leading with vulnerability, trust, and mutual respect is a winning approach. Number 4, even when you lose your cool, be honest with those around you to let them know that your emotions may not actually be a result of what they did, but might be something that is completely separate from them. Number 5, if you're not intentional, your career will continue to take and take until you realize you've got nothing left to give and nothing left for yourself to live a comfortable life. Number 6, it's important to realize what is truly important and meaningful to us and be mindful about what can wait to a later time. In being self-aware in those 2 areas, we can truly find a balance in our lives. Number 7, we are feeling beings who also think. Deliberately managing the water in your cup is important to be a person that you feel proud to be. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed learning these skills today, and I'm so honored to have this platform to share these conversations with you.